myself. Welcome to Urban Strategy in the Present Tense. My name is Andrew Zitzer. I'm an associate professor at the Westfall College of Media, Art, and Design at Drexel University, where I lead the Urban Strategy Master's Program, which is an interdisciplinary urban studies and leadership program. And I also teach in arts administration. This webinar series is an opportunity for us to talk through critical issues facing the Philadelphia region with people who are really doing things, to support our great city and region. And the focus of today's conversation is on the upcoming election and sort of the innovative strategies that our guests are employing to, deeply engage people in the democratic process. And so I want to welcome Lorene Cary and Adam Barbanel-Fried and Bree Doldon, and we're going to talk through some of the practices that you are doing to engage folks in the lived experience of democracy. I just want to thank the Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation for helping us put together and promote these webcasts, and Thomas Devaney and Hazel Taquito, who produce this and engineer this and promote this. Just welcome to all of you. So my first kind of question, just to get everyone a little introduction, is, in my mind, nobody's born into this work. You have to make your way into this work, right? And you've all made your way into this work in different ways, this work of engaging people in the democratic process. And so if you wouldn't mind just speaking to what sort of inspired you and lit the fire to get into this work, especially knowing that some of you come from other parts of the ecosystem. So Lorene, would you mind just telling us a little bit about you and Vote That John?
Sure. I come to this through writing. I teach creative writing. My students, number of years ago, I started working so that my students could write to publish rather than just give me a paper. I give a grade, I give it back to them. I'm so over it. They're over it. It's boring. It's not useful. And it doesn't help you learn to write for other people. I wanted them to have that experience. So we started something called Safe Kids Stories. They wrote about young people, what keeps them safe, psychologically, spiritually, intellectually, all that. And we did all kinds we did sports, poetry, various things. When the Parkland shootings happened, we canceled, that was February, we canceled the March feature. I don't know, it was going to be poetry or something. And in that feature, instead, the students wrote articles about the March for Their Lives, about students walking out in high schools and getting suspended. They just wrote all about it. And the idea was we said this was going to be stuff for young people to read on the buses to keep them company, right? Okay. After the march, they all watched it. We talked about it. What they said to me, my students who are often bossy and usually right, they said, what you need to do next time, next term, is you need to teach this class with publishing, but make it about voting. So that we write stuff, your next student will write stuff to convince other 18 to 24-year-olds to vote. That's what you need to do. So that summer, I spent sort of creating this with 9, 10, 11 young people from high school to alums. One Temple professor in the Klein College, David Brown, who was wonderful. We came up with the entity, like you needed some platform. So we came up with that. And then the next term I taught this class, writing in politics, so they would write to Vote That John. And the idea was to amplify youth voice. It's just a class for just writers. We're not claiming to do more than we do, but how do you find what other young people are doing and how do you amplify that voice? How do you sprinkle the fairy dust on it to make this seem cool and not stupid or nerdy or worthless or doesn't make a difference, etc.? How do you make it fun? How do you answer the outrage with connection and delight? How do you make people not, scroll past it on their phones?
Yeah, I mean, two things that speak to me so powerfully are, the idea that arts and writing is an entree into thinking about citizenship and democracy. And there's so many people over really the ages that have explored that nexus, but somehow I think a lot of people miss that connection, that, creative practice is a mode of expressing our citizenship and our humanity. And of course, the engagement of young people is so important in this. There's so many, my wife is a public school teacher in Philadelphia. I think I mentioned that on every webinar. And, she encounters students who get to fifth grade and don't know who the president is, or what the three branches of government is, or what state we live in. And she has a lot of civic education catch up to do with them. And of course, in some ways, those are like the most superficial things to know, right? But they're also foundational. If you don't know that, you can't sort of lift off from there. And so engaging youth in this process to me is critical work. Um, Adam and Bree, you guys have a project changing the conversation together and work on this incredible technique of deep canvassing. And I'd love to hear just from each of you how you uncovered your drive to do this kind of work.
Bree, you want to go first?
Absolutely. My, I guess, drive started as a kid. My lived experience as a first generation American has really given me a different perspective on the political process and the accessibility of engaging with our political system. The beginnings of my career were in public relations and doing impact-driven public relations for healthcare and science companies. After a few years, which also happened to be right when I started with CTC, which was about February, March, the world started really picking up in a way that was familiar and terrifying to me. And I don't think that I would have been able to sleep well had I not known that I'm doing everything that I can every day to get other people engaged in the political system and the political process, and talking to people and just reinforcing that they belong as a part of it. So I was brought into organizing through CTC, through Adam, and this is an organization that I really admire. So again, thank you for having us and for having me.
That's awesome.
You want me to just jump in here, Andrew?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I was attracted to organizing because I was always interested in history and politics, and not from an intellectual perspective, but really there are a lot of problems in the world and we need to fix them. And yeah, as a child of a man who had to flee Nazi Germany, I take what happens politically pretty seriously, and my role and what I can do to affect it. And I was attracted to the world of organizing. Originally, I was interested in politics or maybe becoming some kind of public interest lawyer or something, but stumbled into this world of organizing. And there was this amazing mix of people bringing folks together from a different backgrounds um, and thinking about how do we help folks who don't necessarily have a seat at the table learn how to find and build a base, build power, effectively turn our frustrations with the world into strategies for change, and really be able to bring their visions and goals for the world into and make them a reality. And it was an amazing uh, world of work to have learned to have grown up in. I was never particularly interested in elections per se. Um, but I will just say in the last several years, the attacks on democracy, the viciousness, the violence, the threats of violence, the nastiness. I mean, we could go through all the quotes that we never thought we would hear from the bully pulpits of some major American leaders. It's outrageous. They're out there in Arizona intimidating voter registration groups asking the canvassers if they are citizens. And so for me, the thing I was interested in is I knew the power of organizing and bringing it to the world of this electoral space. And that's really what I see deep canvassing as a beautiful, uh, it's a beautiful connection between those two really important bodies of work.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we will get into deep canvassing and the technique, which I'm really interested
Yeah.
in. But what I think I'm observing in this conversation is that our paths to being an American are so different, and yet there's this commonality of like arriving at this moment of crisis, this moment of fear from various different viewpoints, and all feeling a responsibility and a pull to engage the question of democracy from our own standpoint, from the experiences that we bring to bear. And I think that is so much of what is needed, and both what I see through the writing process and through the deep canvassing process, as I understand it, is to try to engage the fullness of each other's humanity and not really just ask for a vote, right? But ask for a relationship. And that to me is transformative. And so that's what I want to get into. And so my first kind of question for all of you, and then I'll sort of focus on each of your projects a little more in depth, is, oftentimes political participation gets flattened into this idea of voting, that if we just vote every year or every 4 years, that we're somehow doing our civic duty and we're checking off a box. And of course, voting is important and everyone needs to vote. But what I want to pose to you and ask of you is like, what are some of the other dynamics that show up in your work to engage people beyond making sure we get them out to vote, but to really engage them in a process of sort of reflection and activation around a broader political engagement, a broader sense of citizenship? So anyone can jump in.
Lorene, do you want to jump in or start
No,
off?
I was waiting for you to jump in, actually. But I
Okay,
can.
okay, please.
So I'll say that there's so many ways at this. And once what I found was I was just trying to teach a class and do this writing with young people. Once that happens though, and other people, there's so many ways that we are hungry for the kind of relationships that Adam is talking and Bree are talking about. There's so many ways that we're hungry for it, particularly as the amount of church membership, community group membership, all of these things that used to give glue, right, are not giving as much glue now. And that we want all those relationships. So there are lots of folks who were older people who just wanted to see young people put into a position where they would get a chance to protect themselves, protect their planet, get their voices. Like they're just so excited. I remember standing in a camera shop getting photos at Christmas with this older guy, and I'm talking to him and he said, "What's that thing you got?" And on the back of my phone, I have the phone wallet, right? The Vote That John phone wallet. He said, what is that? You got, and I said, "Oh, this is," and I looked down, I found one, I gave him one. And he said to me, I said, would you like, we're going to do something, you want to volunteer, and he said, "I'll tell you the truth. I'm afraid of young people. I don't even come out of my house very much. I'm afraid." I said, "Well, come to this. You'll be with young people." I mean, he said, "I would like to be with young people, but I'm scared." So we get these people who then stay on the Instagram or whatever it is, or no, they don't stay on the Instagram. That's a lie. Our Instagram also posts on Facebook. So they access it through Facebook instead, right? But they want it because they want to see young people outside of school. They want to hear their voices. They want to see what they're doing. They want the fun too. And they want it not just to be fun. They're really frightened about young people. So, I mean, that's a spin-off. I never expected that. I never expect to have as many teachers as we have who are interested in sort of picking this up and giving it for extra credit. Like that's this whole other area that I never thought of. But of course it makes sense. Each of us, when we see a child out in the street, you smile, right? You watch them. They're so wacky. They're doing the popping the wheelies, and you look at them and say, "Oh Jesus, don't go to the end." But you're also saying, "All right, boy, try it, do it," right? Like we all feel that. So that some of that is happening too, in the context of growing up, rite of passage. It's like a bar mitzvah. It's a rite of passage. You want to see them do this thing. Yeah.
Lorene, I love that. And what I, think is such an important observation that you're making is that there are blockages in our society. Young people are maybe dismissive of old people, and old people are afraid of young people, and rural people don't know how to make sense of city people, and vice versa, and the left and right. And I just think there's so much disconnection and so much blockage in our systems of relating that, to create opportunities for people who don't normally encounter each other to encounter each other, and then to turn that into action, collective action, is a real renegotiation of a social relation or social contract. And I think that's important.
And it has to come in ways that are not about money, because everybody who makes money better when we're in little pieces, right? Everybody who wants to get power is thinking about, not everybody, but one of the ways to get power is to think about the segments and how you'll use them to get what you want from them. So that interconnection is not useful to people who want money or want power.
Adam and Bree, you can jump off on that, or I can even go back to my original question, which is like, what comes after we vote? Like, what's beyond voting, that voting allows us, that conversation about voting allows us to access?
Yeah, I've been thinking about your original question, and more of a cyclical terminology than more than sequential. Because something that we do at CTC through deep canvassing is we really emphasize meeting people where they're at and listening to what people are sharing with us deeply and authentically. And the first step to be able to engage in that system, in our political system, and vote and go beyond voting, is to feel like you belong, and you belong as a part of it, and to keep on reinforcing that belonging. And that's something that we do a lot through our conversations, in listening and in the questions that we ask. And it brings it back to this whole, there's a whole circle there of going beyond voting and what comes first in terms of casting your ballot and going beyond, or feeling as if you belong, feeling as if you can take action and mobilize beyond voting, and feeling encouraged to cast a ballot.
Yeah, and to build on that, thank you, Bree, and also to build on that, I'll just offer, for me, one of the great things about the work we're doing, it builds on also what Lorene was just saying, which is, I'm sorry, Lorene?
Yes.
Is and the name of this this event we're doing today, the power of listening and also just the need to connect across differences. We like build up these barriers in our minds of different people from different groups and all of our, so much of social media and, remote work and not connecting and, just I process the humans through these screens. And yet when we go out there in the neighborhood, we talk face to face and we can approach each other with this very universal thing that we can all relate to as humans, which is a story, the telling of a story about something that's true to me, the powerful impact of that, and the power of then listening to the person. So often, folks, you're reading about the politics, you're reading in so much of politics is written about from the perspective of, well, does it say this to the, how does it affect the polls? And this group of people think this way. And why are these people apathetic? And I go out and I meet people. I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of people in West Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, Northwest neighborhoods where there's very low voting turnout rates. And people who might not vote, but it's not that they're apathetic. In my mind, I'm not a writer like you, Lorene, but so I'm interested in your thought on this word. But my concept of apathy means you don't care. And it's not that folks don't care. It's that they don't necessarily know, or they don't necessarily connect their care for the world with voting or with taking action. They might not know that they can take action. And the beauty of it all for me is it's not about a candidate, it's not about a policy, which may or may not work. It's about people talking to one another and connecting and listening.
Yeah, I want to just underline that. I think it's brilliant what you do to reverse that idea that what I do, what I vote about, what I think won't affect, because there are so many people doing so much, running as fast as they can to affect their neighborhoods and their world and doing all kinds of stuff. But America's worked very hard and has found very good ways to let people know that their ideas, their votes, whatever, won't make a difference. I mean, America's worked very hard on that. So it's, for me, it's like the only rational response to generation after generation after generation of having your vote taken away, undone, undercut, sealed up in a second or third damn envelope. Like the rational response to that, after you've gotten burned a lot, is just to stand aside and do these other things instead. Do your soup kitchen, help your kids, do all this other work, but step aside from the superstructure that has been undermining you and that does not tell a real story or an honest story or a story with spiritual meaning. I mean, it makes sense to me.
God, I mean, that's so powerful what both of you are saying. What we do in our political discourse is we flatten everyone into, a red voter, a blue voter, an apathetic non-voter, and everything is sorted into psychographics and demographics. And what I think we're talking about here is restoring humanity, voice, and agency to people who inherently possess it, and the system is designed to shunt it aside and take that away from them. And so, I guess my question is, how does, in particular, the technique of deep canvassing re-inscribe and rebuild that social relation through story? And frankly, I'll say, when I've done canvassing before and I've done it the traditional way, it's like, do you agree with me or not? Do you like my candidate or not? And oftentimes people say all kinds of things that aren't in alignment with my bubble, my little politics bubble. And I don't really know what to say about that. And it seems like what deep canvassing is doing, and you'll tell me if I'm right, is like really not going at it from that direction, but going, in a different way to try to establish a rapport that is generative. And so can you talk about the technique? And then also I might even impose on you or Bree to see if we can actually role play it and try one so people who are
Ah,
watching can see.
okay. Well, I'll start to explain this by telling a story, which was in 2020, in August, we were canvassing in the Philadelphia area. We were experimenting with how we might be able to do a safety first deep canvassing. We were beginning to learn more and more about COVID. We had been shut at home because of lockdowns and whatnot. And we now knew it was no longer just, it wasn't necessarily touch base as much as in, if you were outside and wearing masks, and we knew a lot by July and August, if you remember this moment. And so we recruited these healthcare professionals to say, how might we reach unlikely voters, people at risk of not voting in person while keeping ourselves as canvassers safe and the voters. And we weren't even sure if people were going to respond, like if they would want to talk. But I had this conversation with this young woman, 19 years old, in Norristown. At that point, we were in our partisan phase, and I just told her we're trying to stop Trump from taking over the country. How do you feel about that? Like, if you had 2 minutes to talk with this guy, what would you tell him? And she said, I tell him, you're taking out, you're bringing out the racists even more than they already were. It's a 19-year-old woman who I later found out identified as Hispanic. Name was Kim. And so then I asked her, well, how likely are you to vote? Scale of 0 to 10. And she said, oh, 0. There's no chance I'm voting. So here we have exactly the kind of person we're looking for. She actually understands the trouble with Trumpism, right? And she's not at all voting, right? There's no interest. And it turns out she's not registered to vote. Now, conventional canvases, Andrew, would probably say, okay, let's register you to vote right now, right? But I don't actually just want to register her to vote. Kim was getting out of a car. That means she has a driver's license. That means she figured out how to get a driver's license, right? Kim can figure out how to register to vote. That's not her problem. Problem for Kim is that she doesn't want to vote. So that's why I then, and this isn't something I or CTC invented. Comes from the world of organizing, and it comes from many other people who've led with this originally out of the LGBT movement when they first showed this to be so effective. We start with a very personal story, and I told her a story, and I said, look, for me, when I'm out there, thinking about who I vote for, I think about politics and the politicians, but I also think about the people I love. And I told her a story about a time my wife was incredibly helpful for me. I was really angry when I had heard that my son, teachers in the school, he was struggling to read. And the teacher eventually took her aside and said, we're not going to be able to teach your son. We are not equipped to teach your son to read. And the their father inside of me wanted to burn that school down. I was so angry. I was like, who are these people that call themselves teachers and they can't teach my kid to read? And my wife really talked me off the edge. I wasn't actually going to burn anyone down, don't worry. But the level of rage that they would I work really hard. And when there's a problem, I work really hard to solve the problem. And I just was thinking what is the matter with these people? And my wife, Leora, says to me, Daron, our son, really has significant reading problems. And these teachers are doing the best they can with what they have. And so we got them, we now have him in a specialized reading program. It turned out he actually had very severe dyslexia, so he needs a specialized program, and he's doing great. But I told Kim this story about Leora helping me realize and assume the best. And then I ask her about a person she loves. And she begins to tell me about her boyfriend. Turns out she has social anxiety, and he really helps her manage things. Navigate those things. And, and she talks to me about the relationship that they have and how they both back each other up. And it's only after we've had this connection, and this is sort of an abbreviated version of the story, but it's not like she's immediately excited to share the story with me, but I patiently wait. And she eventually opens up and tells me this story. And then at the end, I say, look, it sounds to me like you and I are both people where we know what it means to love someone and have them love you, where we know what it means to rely on someone and they rely on you. And then I think about this Make America Great Again movement, the Trumpist movement. And it's the complete opposite, where they're leading with hate and viciousness and lies. And I really want to stop them. And then she says, yeah, me too. So then I said, how likely are you to vote, Kim? She's like, well, I'm not registered to vote. Like, oh, would you like to? So the point is, and then we registered her vote and she voted. And we were right. We have hundreds and hundreds, we have several thousand conversations that have happened like this. And it seems, I'm going to tell you, my early organizing days, I was a very, let's talk turkey. I just want to know if we win, how many houses have we built? How many schools have we, created? How many people have we helped? And, I do believe that there's a value in that. That's the discipline about the numbers is what I like about the electoral strategy. And the people we speak to, of every 100 people we speak to, 87 of them vote. And, randomized control trials have shown that this is the most effective form of voter persuasion that has ever been measured. And so, we think about folks who are quote unquote apathetic, right? And here we have Kim, who actually had an opinion. She was pretty articulate, for a 19-year-old who doesn't spend a lot of time talking about politics, thinking about it. But no one really spent the time to really connect with her patiently like a human. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question specifically, Andrew, but that's a sense of what we do and what we train people to do, because you don't need to be an expert on politics or policies or politicians. The beauty of this is it's not about that. It's not about the expertise on those things. It's actually about being able to connect as two humans and and base the conversation and our concerns and dreams and struggles and hopes for the world.
The power of story. Lorene knows the power of story. She's a master storyteller. And, the idea that narrative is our pathway to connection and our pathway to relationship, that way, if you see Kim on the street 2 days later, you have a connection. That's not just about voting, that's about human community. And story can make that happen. I see that firsthand in the work that the Drexel Writers Room does, which some of you may know, and in all of this kind of work. And I guess a follow-up question before we, if you're willing, do a role play is, it's one thing when the story that you elicit or the conclusion that you mutually come to is, we are both on the same side of this issue. We want the same thing out of this political moment. How does it work for either of you, Lorene or Adam and Bree, when you encounter someone who, expounds on values that feel very counter to your own, or maybe the values are the same, but the conclusion they come to is so different that, Trumpism or what have you is the path to prosperity and healthiness and stuff. And I don't know if you see that, Lorene, as much with the youth, but I'm sure we've all encountered it in Facebook and families and, in places. So how do you deal with that idea of the disagreements and the polarization in the midst of trying to make a genuine human connection?
Mine is probably simpler. because this is it starts in school and it's about education, because it's about writing. And I always tell them that what they're learning are all kinds of things that allow you to write that you're not taught about in school. So being able to write an excellent email, go out and talk to people, do an event, follow up, like all that stuff. You can write a beautiful short story, but if you can't write to an edit, if you can't find an editor, if you can't get it together to write, and I say that in a pejorative kind of word, get it together, but often we're very afraid. We don't know how, like if you can't do those things, then what you write, you might as well dig a hole and pee on it and then walk away, because that's what will happen to your story. It will just die. So my contract with them is about helping them write this thing. And the thing that we're writing about is voting, their cohort, the issues that matter to them. So I say to them, all roads lead to voting. Every single thing in your life is votable. Everything you do, anything, any passion you have. It's like the funny classroom flip side of what Adam's saying. Anything you love, anything that threatens you, all of this, it's all votable. So therefore, start where you are and write your way toward voting. Right? That's what we do. And the other thing I'm always telling them is that part of your job as a young writer is to figure out how to be the boss of your own mind. Because if you're not the boss of your mind, then other people are going to be the boss of your mind. So be the boss of your mind. So we to lay these things out and say, what do you want to write about? What makes it fun? What do you love? What doesn't? And it's very hard for a lot of students because, you know, the guy that brought them to the prom is sort of obedience and doing what the teacher says. That's what got them into that classroom. So for me to say, you know, it's Tuesday, Monday night, last night after class, I had a long conversation with a young man who said, but I don't know what tonight was the first time I really wanted to write about something. You know, I've written. So all of that is to say that by keeping it on that, by saying to them, I'm going to be rigidly pain in the ass-idly, unflinching, I'm going to be nonpartisan with you, right? That's it. And if somebody next to you wants to write about something that you disagree with, that's my contract with the university is that by the time you leave me, you should be able to write better. That's my contract. And if I stop and I stumble and kick stones along the way, and y'all don't learn how to write because we're on the floor, you know, we take off our earrings and we're pulling hair about who, like that's not getting us to this adulthood place. I have had a few students who were much more interested in and like their parents thought that Donald Trump was the answer to many of the things that all of them agreed were problems. So I said, okay, let's think about the problems and how you're going to write about it. And let me try to figure out a way, because my job is to figure out a way to keep curious about you and help you write it better. I will say that during COVID, I had a student who said to me, remember that when everybody went on Zoom like in 3 days and nobody knew what the hell we were doing, and it was like a cluster of a class. And this young woman stayed with me in spring term on the Zoom after everybody left and said, but don't worry, Miss Cary, because I was trying to figure out fun ways to do it. Okay, we're break. I'm going to be at 40th and Locust Street. Everybody close up your Zoom and come out to 40th and Locust, and I'm going to give you a hat, just anything to keep it alive, because I teach for 3 hours on Zoom. You know, And she said to me, but don't worry. Don't worry, Professor Cary, because after Easter, all of this is going to go away. This COVID thing. And I will tell you that I cried. I'm supposed, but I just cried. She's smart. She's beautiful. She cares about people. She started this club of kids in West Philly to help them do. And I said to her, well, right now, I know older people who are dying. And no matter what you think is going to happen in a couple of weeks, in my community, I've got to pay attention to the people who are sick now. So I can't go there with you. I as a human being, I cannot go there with you. Hard.
Yeah, Adam and Bree, I mean, for you, I mean, this issue, I think this issue of polarization, this issue of, a slamming of the door in the face, if Bree shows up on my doorstep, pardon me, Bree, and I say, I don't like the way you look, I'm not going to talk to you. I mean, how does deep canvassing work with that? What does that engagement look like?
Somebody
Want me to
stands
jump in?
behind Bree and says, that child is beautiful, I'm gonna smack your face.
Yeah, seriously, no kidding. I'm with you. That's not always what we offer in our training as advice, but I appreciate the sentiment. Yeah. So first of all, Andrew, one of the things we really try to do is talk to people on the street, on the porch, on the sidewalks. It's a lot harder to shut a door if there's no door there. Um, and at this stage in the organization's career, we are focusing on trying to find unlikely voters, the people at risk of not voting tend not to be the people on the voter lists because they move so much. These are the folks who they have a transient life, that maybe they're on the margins, they're lower income, they're younger, right? But to answer your question, spirit of your question, which is someone who really disagrees, I think there's a question as that we have to ask ourselves as a campaign strategically, like how much time can I spend with this person? And we're really committed to using deep canvassing to stop the anti-democratic movement out there that is, questioning elections and leading with white supremacy, like embracing like the guys in the white hoods, white supremacy and sexism and patriarchy and, you know, uh, and so we really have to be clear. Like, if you're okay with that, I'm not going to judge you. I have people I love. This is not a try this at your Thanksgiving dinner with every one of your cousins routine, right? I think you can learn a lot from it, but we are running a campaign and we are trying to find people who will join us. But I think when we're working in West Philly or North Philly, as we have in the past, like the way I think about it is, first of all, I just want to say in politics, people talk about persuasion versus get out the vote as if it's two totally different things. And I actually think it's racially coded because I think there is a world of people in communities of color who are and lower income communities and some communities that are more marginalized and less connected, where folks actually need to be persuaded to participate. Like, why should I show up? And there's a level of taking me for granted that the power of listening speaks to. But it's the same skill set, quite honestly, because all of these people, no matter whether we're in like, a mixed area of like suburban Doylestown or North Philly, they're all human, as are all of our volunteers. And we respond to the same kinds of hopes and dreams and struggles and fears and anxieties and grief, right? The details are different, but we all have feelings and we all respond to story and we all respond to listening. So, the way I think about it when we're working in Philadelphia is I have found that there is a range between the people who are skeptical versus people who are cynical where the way in my mind I differentiate the two as, you know, a skeptic is somebody who's like, this doesn't make sense. Like, you know, the local council person didn't, you know, the city council, the city government, like schools, right? Things aren't working. There's a guy, Rich, you know, who I spoke to a few years ago, who he was just telling me that school, you know, is like, want me to vote for like a judicial election? Like, you know what my issues are? Like, you know, I'm trying to get my family out of here. Like the school's terrible. There's violence in the school. There's violence in my neighborhood. They don't pick up the trash. Look at the streets. You know, they're all ripped up. Nobody cares about it. Why should I even vote? Right. And just hearing him out, Robert, you know, and just hearing him talk about the struggles and fears of being the dad of two girls in the city, you know, and anywhere today's day and age. And just listening to that story, um, having the patience to take the time to like really hear someone out, um, you know, amazing things can happen. And not saying that you're wrong, not saying, you know, Brene Brown says that empathy is not relating to the experience, but relating to the emotions underneath the experience, you know. Um, I was once canvassing I this past Sunday, I canvassed this woman who started telling me about her son who she lost to gun violence 2 years ago. I cannot tell you exactly what that's like. I cannot relate specifically to that story, but I can relate to grief and shock and just the shock of grief of these terrible tragedies that happen, you know? And so I think, I don't know if that answers your question specifically, Andrew, but I really think the power of just taking the time to relate with one another as another human goes a long way. Bree, do you have anything to add?
You know, I don't want to sound so campy, hunky-dory, but ultimately my thoughts on this are the core value of love and connecting to people through the people that they love is a stronger universal value than any policy, any issue. I don't know exactly how much everyone on this call loves their family and in what exact capacity that looks like, but I do know that we would all do anything for our family and for the people we love and when we approach these conversations through that lens, it makes it so much less likely to get into any territory of polarization or of negativity. And it's just a great mechanism to connect with people and to tie that connection back to voting, but not aggressively in someone's face.
I really, before you say campy, I don't think it's campy at all, at all, at all, at all. I think what we try to do is just like, we use resources, right, to keep our bodies alive. And to give ourselves shelter, etc. And then we've come up with this idea that we can get little pieces of metal or paper that we can trade for those resources, right? I think essentially connection is a spiritual activity. It is, when you get a true connection deeply, that has to do with our beyond, yes, emotions, yes, but not just emotions. Emotions are much more manipulatable than the spirit. Yeah. And I think once you've touched the spirit, then you know each other's humanity in a way that you don't otherwise. And then we can talk, then we can go back to talking about the little signifiers that have to do with how are we going to solve the problems of living together, right? I mean, that's what marriage is about. Oh my God, how are we going to solve these problems of living together but we do it out of this context of love, as opposed to doing it out of the context of, I get what I want, or else, and,
Right.
or, you know.
You know, what I really admire about this is the idea that there's kind of a short game and a long game. The short game is, let's get everybody voting as soon as the next election, and let's vote locally and statewide and nationally, and make sure we're participating in something that's a means end kind of thing. And then there's this long game, which is what all of you are talking about, but what Lorene just said so beautifully, which is spirit to spirit, person to person, that the idea of persuasion is not about, like, if I tell you this fact about what the government did, you're going to change your vote. But if I connect with you and then we reconnect and you connect with others, we can have a conversation about living together that may lead to a realization that we need to change course.
Yeah. And I would also offer, Andrew, that the short term of a particular election and this particular election is, in my mind, a really big deal. And so the power of this is not just about this election. Absolutely. The power of this is, if you, for me, I'm just going to say, I don't speak for anyone else on this call, but it's the power of deep canvassing for me is, it's not going to solve all the problems if you decide to vote this year. It's not, no, I will never make you that promise. But I do believe that if I take the time to talk to people, and I know that it can spark a sense of hope. And I think that's what I really related to, the sense of the spirit, right? The story as a tool is how humans have processed information. But it's totally about connection spirit to spirit and reigniting. For me, I think at times it's really reigniting hope, or it's acknowledging grief, or it's, inspiring action. Yeah.
Well, I'm conscious of everybody's time, and we only have about 5 minutes left. And so I had this idea, or Tom, actually, our producer, had this idea that we would like role play a little deep canvassing. But do we even have time to do that in 5 minutes, or is that a fool's
It's
errand?
usually it's about 15 minutes, but your average conversation. So
Yeah, let's not do it wrong, right? Let's not show everyone how we do it wrong.
Yeah.
we
Let
would
me
be
ask.
happy to have anyone join us at one of our trainings. And if it's all right with you, I'd love to put our website in the
Yeah, please
chat.
do
Or
put the website in the chat. If you can, I'll do it for you. Because I think when you do it, not everyone will see it. So put it in the chat, and then I'll put
yeah.
it in the chat to everyone.
And what, if I may, I'll just offer that we really, ctc4progress.org. Oh, actually, I don't think I sent that to everyone, but here, I'll do it now. It's www.ctc, the number 4, the word progress.org. And if the things that Bree and I were talking about sound interesting to you, and even if they sound scary to you or outrageous to you, there's a lot of ways to be involved. But I also want to just let you know, we really spend a lot of time training and supporting people who never thought they would be able to do this, who then become some of the best deep canvassers out there.
Mm.
Yeah. We got a lot of people we're hoping we can engage in voting this year.
And Lorene, yours is votethatjawn.com, John, Philly John, JAWN. I'm not sure whether these are going through to the attendees or just to us, so I want to say it out loud. And I guess I'll ask you, Lorene, how can people engage your organization? And to both of you, how can people support your organization if they're like stuck in the traffic of life and want to support you? Are you guys able to take donations? And I'm not doing a sales pitch, but I'm just, how can we work with you all to make sure that these objectives are being met?
I love, Andrew, that you're not making a sales pitch. Well, why not make a sales pitch? We do love for people, first of all, just to follow the dog on social media. It is social media. It's not human to human connection, but why not get something in your feed that is fun and youthful and nonpartisan, and eat your broccoli. It's good for you. It's not just eating your broccoli. It's actually, I'm sorry, I can't make the metaphor work in 4 minutes, so but it's good for you and it's fun. So we're doing an event on 10/16. If you follow, then you'll see. So we're doing an event on 10/16 at City Hall. It's a press conference, and we're trying to get young reporters. And the students decided they wanted to get youth editors and reporters from high school and college papers to come to the event. And then we have lots of people speak and have conversations, and they could take stories back to their home communities. And the students came up with this idea because there were so many school districts or school boards that were afraid to let young journalists write about the election, right? I'm a woman whose books have been banned in many places. I understand this. I know this is real. So they said, we'll give good nonpartisan. So we have the commissioners, we have 2 kids who are activists. One is this young person who got your Drexel, to take the day off for elections. It was your last we have 3 journalists to come and talk about how they cover youth vote, from Philadelphia Citizen, which has done a lot of good coverage of that, and then 2 young journalists from WHYY and one from the Inquirer who will meet students. We have the Drexel Jazz Tets to do music. They're a house band. They're going to be lots of fun. We have a caterer, right? There's a drum line, a wonderful caterer called Brown's Kitchen. And the idea is if you know a student, journalist, or influencer, have them go to Vote That John. Sign up and come there, please.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all for joining in this, hopeful conversation. Every day we need hope. Every day in this moment we need hope. And yeah, you all give me and everyone hope. Lorene, you're going to say something?
Yes. Did Adam not get a chance to answer?
Oh, go ahead, Adam.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would say we are canvassing every weekend. We offer training every week through election day. The sooner you get involved, the better. And there are a lot of ways to help. Honestly, the highest priority way to get involved, if you were to ask me, the biggest impact you can make would be to sign up to Deep Canvas with us this month. In 2020, the people who had no history of voting became 30% more likely to vote after a conversation with one of our people. That's like a sleeping giant of American democracy right there, I think, if you could just imagine. And so, yeah, we'd love to have you come out and learn to Deep Canvas and Canvas. We're going to be out in West Philly, the 3rd Ward, this weekend. And if there's other ways you want to volunteer, we are bringing people to vote at the satellite election offices today. People don't know this in Philadelphia. You can vote today. You walk into the satellite election offices, you can fill out the forms and vote. You don't need to wait on some crazy long line and, on election day, which you may or may not be able to make. So CTC for Progress, we're happy to train you. And yeah, super appreciate it being invited here. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you all. And this is my actual sales pitch. If you like what you're hearing today in this conversation or any of the other conversations you may have watched in our archive, these are the questions we're asking and wrestling with at Drexel in the Urban Strategy Program. We care about the moral and spiritual and political imperative of reforming our communities and reforming our bonds and building a democracy and accountability. And, we do that through a variety of ways. We study, we learn together, and we're out in the streets too. And this is a master's program that I've helped to build that I really believe in, that is trying to do this work. And we partner with all of the folks like you guys just to do this work. And we invite you, to continue to engage with us. So Vote That John, CTC for Progress, and good luck to all of us in the coming months. Thanks so much.